Hey guys, welcome back, it's Rap again. In today's video, my neighbor attacked paramedics that were called to assist my elderly mom in an emergency. She stopped them from doing their job and this Karen is totally out of control. Let's dive right into the video. I always heard about the stereotype of the neighbor from hell, but I never thought I would actually have to deal with one. That is until Karen moved into the house next door. For context, Karen is a middle-aged woman with a short temper and egoistic personality, and she uses every opportunity to make my life miserable. She is part of my local HOA and had been a thorn in my side since the day she moved in. She seemed to take pleasure in causing problems for others using her position in the HOA, particularly those she deemed different or inferior. As an Asian American, I quickly became a target for her hate and bigotry. It seems like every day there is something new that Karen is complaining about. At first, it was small things like complaining about the color of my house or the type of my plants I had in my front yard. I would be mowing my lawn and she would come over to complain about the noise. She would call the HOA to complain about the smallest violations. Stuff like my bin being left out for too long or my car being parked in front of my own house. It was clear that she just wanted to make my life miserable. But one time I was walking my dog around the neighborhood when Karen came out of her house and started screaming at me. "Keep your damn dog off my lawn!" she yelled, even though my dog was on a leash and had not even gone near her property. I tried to reason with her, but she just kept yelling and making a scene. It was humiliating and I felt like I could not even walk in my own neighborhood anymore without being harassed. But then things started to escalate. Karen would steal packages off of my porch and leave nasty notes in my mailbox accusing me of being a terrible neighbor and a bad influence on the community. She even went as far as to make up violations and lies about me to the HOA board. And when I rebuked those rumors and demanded justice, I was ignored. It seems like these HOA jerks are a toxic, tight-knit family. One day, I came home to find that Karen had stolen my garden tools from my garage. I was shocked that someone would do something like that, but I knew it was her because I had seen her snooping around my property before. When I confronted her about it, she denied it and said that I must have misplaced them. I knew better, but without any proof, there was nothing I could do. So I decided to get CCTV cameras, but of course, even as the cameras were being installed, Karen kept throwing insults saying how much of a coward I am. Few days later, I came home to find Karen in my backyard trying to steal some of my prized tomatoes. When I confronted her yet again, because this time I had caught her in the act, she became defensive and accused me of stealing from her garden. It was absurd and infuriating, but unfortunately not surprising given her track record. But the worst part of it all was Karen's racism towards me. She would make snide comments about my race and culture and would try to exclude me from community events and gatherings. She would publicly mock my accent and would not even stop when someone interferes and even tried to get the HOA to force me to remove my cultural decorations from my front yard. It was hurtful and exhausting to deal with on a daily basis. Another incident happened at a community event hosted by the HOA. I was volunteering to help set up tables and chairs when Karen walked up to me and said, "Why don't you go back to your own country where you belong?" I was shocked and hurt by her racist comment. I could not believe someone could be so blatantly prejudiced in this day and age. I reported her to the HOA, but they did not take any action, saying it was just her opinion. It all came to a head when Karen went so far as to spray paint a racial slur on my garage door. I was shocked and infuriated by her hateful act. I tried to confront her and reason with her, but Karen was unresponsive and unapologetic. She seemed to revel in the power she had over me like a bully on the playground. When she found out that I was considering legal action against her, she doubled down on her efforts to intimidate and harass me. I still called the police and reported her for the hate crimes, and thankfully, she was arrested and charged with vandalism and a hate crime. However, she was released soon after and continued to make my life a living hell, this time with renewed enthusiasm, as if going to jail has given her some kind of encouragement. It was during all of this when my mother's medical emergency happened. She suddenly collapsed in our house and I had to call an ambulance. I remember feeling panicked and scared as I watched the paramedics wheel her out on a stretcher and load her into the ambulance. It was a moment of crisis, a time when any normal person would put aside their petty grievances and help in any way they could. But Karen was not a normal person. What's going on here? Why is that ambulance parked in front of my house? Karen yelled, pointing her finger at the paramedics. The paramedics calmly explained the situation to Karen, telling her that it was an emergency and they needed to park the ambulance as close as possible to our house. But Karen was not having any of it. She started ranting about how she does not allow anyone to park in front of her house and how this was disrupting her peace. This is unacceptable. Move that ambulance now. This is my property and you have no right to be here. Karen continued to scream, her face turning red with rage. I tried to interfere at that moment. My mother is having a medical emergency and the paramedics need to park the ambulance here. Please understand. But of course, how could a Karen ever be understanding for others, especially those that she loves to bully? Karen, I don't care. You cannot just park an ambulance here. It's against the law. I tried to keep calm because getting violent would not be solving any problems. By the way, I'm not sure if I agree here. Anyway, actually, it's not against the law to park an ambulance in front of your house if it's for an emergency. But yet again, how could a Karen ever understand the law that is not in her favor? Karen, I don't give a damn. Move this ambulance right now or you will see what I do. But the paramedics couldn't move the ambulance, they had to keep it parked where it was to ensure my mom got the necessary care as quickly as possible. Karen was not having any of it though. She went inside only to come back out with a baseball bat and started swinging it at the ambulance, smashing the windows and causing a scene that attracted the attention of the entire neighborhood. The paramedics quickly retreated back into my house to avoid getting hit by Karen's wild swings. However, she wasn't done yet. She kept smashing the windows and yelling insults at the paramedics even as they called the police. It was a terrifying scene and I could see that my mother was in distress. Her pain was clearly visible on her face and it broke my heart to see her suffering like that. Karen was so caught up in her own rage that she didn't even notice my mother's condition or how she could seriously harm the paramedics. It was clear that Karen's behavior was not only selfish and inconsiderate, but also dangerous. When the police arrived, they tried to calm Karen down and reason with her, telling her that she was putting people's lives in danger with her violent behavior. But Karen was having none of it. She continued to yell and scream even as the police threatened that her actions would have some serious consequences. Police officer, ma'am, if you don't move out of the way, we will have to use force. Karen laughed manically at their words and I genuinely thought in that moment that this Karen needed some serious therapy because her actions were not at all normal. Karen, I won't move. You cannot make me. Despite the police's attempts to persuade her, Karen continued to be uncooperative and as a last resort, the police had to use force to move her out of the way so that the paramedics could continue with their work and load my mother into the ambulance to be taken to the hospital. The situation was very stressful, but thankfully the paramedics were able to quickly attend to the patient and she was transported to the hospital in time for treatment. After the emergency was taken care of, the police officer approached me and asked for my statement regarding Karen's behavior. Police officer, can you tell me what happened between you and your neighbor Karen? Me, yes officer. Karen has been a constant bully to everyone in the neighborhood, including my family. She has vandalized our property, harassed us with hate speech and has even threatened us in the past. Police officer, I see. Can you tell me more about her hate crimes? Me, she's made racial slurs against my family which are completely unacceptable. She has also targeted other neighbors who are minorities and made them feel unsafe. The police officer listened carefully as I recounted the details of Karen's behavior towards me and others. Police officer, have you reported any of this to the authorities before? Me, yes I have, but nothing really has been done. It's like Karen has been given a free pass to terrorize the neighborhood. She either gets freed after going to jail for a few days or gets absolutely no consequences because the HOA of this neighborhood says that her hate comments are just her opinions and they could do nothing about it. Which I suppose ripe stars actually in some countries is true. But anyway, police officer, I understand. What happened today with the ambulance was unacceptable and we will take appropriate action to ensure that something like this doesn't happen again. Me, thank you officer, I appreciate your help. As the police officer finished taking my statement, Karen could be seen in the distance, still protesting and yelling at the paramedics and the police. Karen, this is outrageous. You cannot do this to me. I have rights as a citizen to my property and my opinions, and you should not listen to this thief who is taking away our money and terrorizing our children. Police officer, ma'am, please calm down. We are just trying to ensure that everyone is safe and taken care of. Karen, don't you understand? It is us who are not safe from these people who are taking over our business and government. It was clear to all of us that there was no way to appease this Karen, as she started struggling in her handcuffs and started throwing insults at the black people who were part of the police force. As the situation escalated, more police officers arrived on the scene to help manage the situation. Eventually, Karen was taken into custody and she faced legal consequences for her actions. And there were a lot of consequences that she faced. Vandalism of the ambulance, for which she was required to pay restitution for the damages caused, and hate crime towards me and my family. She was also interfering with medical treatment, which was Karen's refusal to allow the ambulance to park in front of her house. Karen's behavior towards the paramedics and the police officer was disruptive and proved to be disorderly conduct. At last, from all the evidence gathered via the CCTV footage, Karen was found guilty of harassment towards me and other minorities in the neighborhood. All this resulted in a significant amount of jail time and hefty fines that Karen was supposed to pay. Above all of this, the Homeowners Association were also charged with discriminatory behavior for not stopping Karen and letting her harass the neighborhood, which eventually led to the dissolution of the HOA. Good riddance. A new committee was formed later based on the votes of all the residents of the area, and while I was offered a position, I refused because becoming an HOA member is not really my thing. However, another Asian American woman did become a part of it, and that was enough for me. When Karen was released, the neighbors that were roaming outside booed, glared, and even laughed at her as she drove to her house. Karen did not come out for 3 days, and on the 4th day I saw a moving company's van parked in front of her house. It took her 2 more days to move away completely, and ever since that day, my life had been so much better. And by the way guys, I was a little bit confused at this part of the story because it sounded like Karen was in jail for 3 days and then came out or something, but obviously there was a jump in time because Karen did spend several years in jail. But anyway, if you enjoyed the story, please don't forget to like the video and maybe even post some star emojis in the comments if you want to support me. Thank you so much. And the next one is a story from r/Am I the Jerk. So I am an Indian woman and a new mother to my little half-Indian, half-American baby girl. She is 6 months old. The day I went into labor, I learned that my husband was having an affair with our neighbor. She is only 22 and has a myriad of mental health issues. She and my husband started an affair after she got out of rehab, but I had no idea that him trying to help her would involve his cucumber. It was a traumatic day. I cannot mention much here, but to put it shortly, she declared that she was 3 months pregnant with my husband's kid and had an emotional breakdown. She fainted and my husband left me alone in the hospital to take her to another ward. He carried her in his arms in front of my own eyes. He returned after a few hours and I had just given birth to our daughter. He took her in his arms, kissed her and left the room. So 2 days go by, my husband returns finally telling me that he will have to move out because his mistress is emotionally fragile and he was the only person in the world who could support her. He supported us financially but rarely visited. His girlfriend spent a few days in and out of the hospital. It was a continuous back and forth of her hospital visits. She gave birth prematurely and the baby spent a lot of time in the NICU struggling between life and death. The baby was also born with a host of disabilities and conditions which would cost them thousands of dollars in medical bills. The last time he came to visit our daughter, he looked really distressed and emotional. That day, I also overheard him talking to her on the phone. He was promising her that he would always prioritize their baby over our baby. He also promised her that he would always love their baby over our baby because their baby was a product of love and our baby was a product of duty sex. That day, I called my parents back in India and told them everything. They told me to come back home. I don't have family in the US. His family was not close to me either, so I am all alone. I came to the US on the fiancé visa to marry him. My former boss back in India got to know what happened to me and offered me a new position, telling me that she would love to have me back. Knowing that my baby would suffer in her father's house, I planned my escape and left the United States. I am never going back. My divorce will be official in some time. India is not a signatory to the Hague Child Abduction Convention, so technically I have not abducted my child. US laws don't apply in India and we didn't have a custody order or arrangement. My husband is now blowing up on my phone. My parents have blocked him everywhere. Some of my friends are telling me that I ripped my baby's father out of her life and that I'm a horrible mother. Am I the a-hole? And yeah, Ripe Stars, let me know in the comments what you think about this. Is OP the a-hole for saving her child from this awful cheating father? Let me know in the comments. A user in the comments said, "Not the a-hole, he lied to you, knocked someone else up, prioritized their pregnancy over your baby's birth, and even admitted to not caring or loving your baby as much as the other. You did the right thing." Comment number 2, not the a-hole. Hell no, prioritize your child. It would be worse for her to grow up with a father that prioritizes another child that is basically the same age. I cannot imagine that sibling rivalry or how awful the 22-year-old may be to them. And yeah, Ripe Stars, I would definitely agree here. OP absolutely did the right thing, and that kid should not grow up with such an awful father. Let me know what you think about this in the comments. And now let's move on to the next story. It starts like this. There are only a few things that can actually get me angry in this world. Messing with my parents is not only on that list, but pretty much on top of it. My parents are in their 80s but healthy and still managing to live in their own home alone. While I don't live with them and never met their neighbor in my entire life, he only had to do one thing to become my sworn enemy. I guess he thought messing with the 2 old people next door would mean he could get away with it without a single problem. He was not expecting me to get involved in the fight though. My mother called me one day telling me that the neighbor had started putting up posts saying it was where his new fence would go. The only thing is that it was way onto my parents' property and it would end up digging half of their driveway. They have a little bit of an odd driveway where it wraps all the way into the back of the house since their garage is back facing for some reason. His new fence was going to be where my parents had concrete and would not allow them enough clearance to get the car back to the garage. On the behalf of my parents, I decided to go next door and talk to the neighbor myself. My idea at the time was maybe if he realized that they had somebody helping advocate for them, he would realize they were not such an easy target and back down. I still think that it might have worked if I was a big strong-looking guy instead of a guy that's friends call him String Bean and looks like a light breeze could knock me over. Me? Excuse me? I want to talk to you about this new fence you are building. Neighbor, are you the guy from the company? I thought you were coming over later, but I can show you where I want it so you can order the right amount of wood. Me? Actually, I'm the son of the couple that lives next door to you. Your fence plan is way on their side of the property, and I wanna just tell you that if you build that fence, I'm gonna make sure that you don't get away with it. He expectantly laughed in my face and closed the door on me. I just wanted to be nice enough to give him a fair warning before I moved forward with the process of destroying him. I know that he did not see me as a threat, but he must have had something in the back of his mind telling him that there might be a problem because he put off the actual destruction of land and building of the fence. My wife was a lawyer, and when I went home, I talked to her about what steps would be best to take in order to make sure that my parents' land got saved and neighbor did not get to bully them. I wanted to right away get a lawyer that was in that field. My wife was part of the family court, so did not handle things like this, and sue him. I was obviously angry and needed to be calmed down by my wife, who told me that before anything happened we had to get a reputable land survey. If we went through a private company or just by old markers on the ground, it could become a problem in court. Unfortunately, it took a while to get the survey, and in the meantime neighbor, I guess, was not worried anymore and started destroying my parents' property in order to build his fence. When the report came back, it turned out that not only did my parents own the land he was building the fence on, but also they owned a small portion of the neighbor's property as well. I took the report and brought it to the neighbor, warning him one last time to stop what he was doing and pay for the repairs for the damage he had done. I guess this guy was pretty cocky because even with proof in front of his face, he did not care and told me not to come to his house again or else he would call the police. That was fine because I had no intention of coming back to his house, and instead I was now going to find my parents a lawyer. I know that this was technically their fight, but I got so invested and basically took it over. They are old, but they are fully capable of fighting their own battles. I just decided to take this one personally. Anyway, I found a lawyer, and after explaining the situation and showing the paperwork, he told me that this seemed pretty open and shut of a case. A formal document was sent to the neighbor requesting to put a stop to this construction and pay the money for damages. Once that got ignored, we were able to take him to court where a judge would force him to accept what was on the document. There was no question of if he was going to have to stop and pay to fix my parents' driveway. With what the survey found out though, there was something else potentially at play. Neighbor had a pool in his yard, and while there is no law against that, it ends up crossing where the actual property line is. That means if my parents wanted to, they could request in the same court hearing that in addition to the fence, his pool was also encroaching on their property and they want it removed. I think you can all guess what I would choose, but it wasn't my choice since I was not the homeowner. My parents are both sweet people that if they found this out in any other kind of situation, they probably would have just done nothing and let things be. I had to get my pettiness from somewhere though, and you can bet that it came from my dear old mom and dad. They figured if neighbor was going to be a total a-hole, that they could play the same kind of game back at him. With that, the suit was filed and we just had to wait for the day to show up in court. Again, since it wasn't actually my lawsuit or property, I had to sit in the back and was not allowed to say or do anything. That was fine though, because the lawyer I got for my parents was more than capable of destroying the neighbor. The only defense he really had was his survey that was from an unreliable source. When he tried to argue, there was no way for him to know that his was not accurate. My lawyer showed that he signed the certified mail that included a survey as well as legal documents stating to stop his construction. His other argument was that he needed a fence to be placed there due to other reasons like noise problems. I could almost hear the judge laugh at the thought of my two elderly parents being so loud that a fence would need to be built. It did not matter because him having a fence was not the problem. He was allowed to build one just on his own property. It was when the judge said that the pool also had to be removed that you could see neighbor finally realizing he was not going to win. He had to pay to have the driveway fully repaired, his pool removed, and a new fence was built now much closer to his house than he wanted it to be. My parents were just happy to get some peace, and I was glad that the neighbor learned not to mess with them. Just because your neighbors might be old, that doesn't mean that they are easy targets to take advantage of. They are capable of fighting their own battles and usually have a bunch of people in their corner to help. And yeah, ripe stars, these are some of the people that I despise the most. The kind of people that take advantage of the elderly. So that's why the result of this story is even sweeter. I have no sympathy or empathy for anyone that takes advantage of elderly people. And with this, we have reached the end of the video. However, if you cannot get enough of my content, please check out my endless playlist, where you can find thousands of hours of content. In addition, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel to not miss any of my daily uploads. Thank you so much in advance, and I hope to see you again tomorrow.